The main stories around this morning, though, efforts are continuing to get as many people who've supported the UK out of Afghanistan before the 31st of August. That's the date when US troops are expected to leave the country.
Thousands are still crowded outside Kabul airport in a desperate bid to get on an evacuation flight. Let's speak now to the former British ambassador to Afghanistan, Sir Nicholas Kay. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
First of all, if you could just start by talking me through the failings that have got us to this point, to the point where we're seeing these desperate images of people desperate to escape.
Where to start? I mean, obviously, the timelines that everybody is working to are not timelines that people anticipated, rightly or wrongly. I think, we will need to learn lessons from this whole 20-year engagement. We'll have to do that in slower time. But in the midst of this crisis, clearly the key thing is to continue to support our troops and our civilians who are on the ground. And let's face it, they're now at least a week, 10 days into this horrendous 24-hour crisis there. So I do praise the efforts that they're doing, superhuman efforts that they're making on the ground. But it's not they who are going to solve this problem on the ground. This needs now political leaders. And I very much welcome the push that the UK is now making to persuade President Biden to extend this deadline. That is the single biggest thing that can be done now to release Afghans from the panic in which they are at the moment. Extend the deadline beyond the 31st of August.
And what can the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, say to Joe Biden when the G7 meets tomorrow to persuade him? Because I'm sure you will have heard the President of the United States speaking last night very firmly about that deadline. There was a chink, though, wasn't there? There was a tiny, in what he said, there was a moment where he admitted that might have to change. What will Boris Johnson have to say to him about that?
I think the US president will be now beginning to feel and sense that the relationship with allies, G7 partners in this case, but NATO allies as well, it is fragile. And this is a time now to heal some of those wounds and to show that we can all work together in our own mutual interest and in the interest of the Afghan people. The whole security posture, the whole arrangement at the airport, of course, was there to secure it against an invading Taliban army and force. Now, what we have seen in this last week is that the Taliban are not the ones posing the threat, the security threat to the airport. And I think we can take a deep breath now, just pause, engage with partners, coordinate the proper plan, also engage with the Taliban on this plan as well, because it is in our mutual interest, Taliban and others, that this passes off in a well-run, safe way.
And when you say those words, engage with the Taliban, I think that's a phrase that many people will almost shudder at. But how far will that engagement go? Are you saying engage with the Taliban at this point to solve this crisis? At what point do you stop that engagement?
Absolutely. And I've been dealing with the Taliban in one way or another since '94. I am not in the camp of this is a new Taliban, the Taliban have changed. But I am very much in the camp of we should engage with the Taliban on things that matter to us. And we should engage, test what they're saying, judge by their actions, but don't trust. And this is a very specific case where we could and should be doing that.
One of the things that the papers are reporting this morning, just talking about that deadline of the 31st of August, there is a suggestion that actually, in order to meet that deadline, that the last flights out of the UK to rescue people would have to leave on the 25th of August. So do you think there is an even greater sense of urgency? Do we need to feel a greater sense of urgency than even that there is at the moment?
Those timelines, yes, are horrendous and impossible. The UK and other countries are still processing the applications from Afghans who may be entitled to be resettled here under the schemes. So that processing is still not even complete, let alone getting them to the airport and getting them aboard flights. So this, the category of people who are entitled to relocate under the various schemes is still large, and that caseload needs to be dealt with. There's another caseload behind that, of course, which will be the caseload of just refugees, relatively ordinary Afghans who want to flee their country for one reason or another. And that, again, I think is something which the international community needs to look at, come up with a concerted plan through the G7, also through the Security Council of the UN. And I welcome the fact that P5 members, permanent 5 members of the Council, will be discussing that. So we need to really just take our time, not rush our fences on this, and immediately extend the deadline for evacuating entitled people.
Tell me this, I'm curious to know, as a former ambassador,
Sure.
How heavy is the weight of responsibility if you were working there now, how heavy is that responsibility to try and protect people, to get people out, to make people safe for an ambassador in that situation?
An enormous pressure, and I have utmost respect for Sir Laurie Bristow, who's doing a great job out there. I mean, yes, you are responsible primarily, of course, for the safety of your own staff, and that cannot be, underestimated in a context like Kabul, the risks and the dangers and the pressures of that. But we are all huge-hearted people. We're representatives of the British nation, which is an open-hearted, big-hearted nation. And of course, we care about the suffering that we see around us. We care about the people who are waiting for hours, days, being trampled in some cases. This is, heart-wrenching indeed for everyone. So the pressures are enormous. But as I say, the people on the ground can only do so much. This is a time now for political leaders of the world through the G7 to come together, put in place and agree a proper evacuation plan, engage with the Taliban if necessary on that plan, but also start to look a little bit long-term. We can't just, deal with the here and now. I hope the G7 will start to frame a strategy for engagement going forward. What are our interests? We agree amongst ourselves. What are our values? We agree amongst ourselves. And there will be huge challenges coming up as well. The country is broke. There's a huge humanitarian problem anyway, people in food insecurity. There will need to be a massive humanitarian assistance program, whatever happens. And I know the UK is going to lead discussion on that at the G7, and I think that's great.
Sir Nicholas Kay, thank you very much indeed for your time this morning.
Thank you very much for having me.